2026 is the year Red Bull could either start building a new dynasty, or it's the one where they could watch the current one burn down. It all hinges on two things: Max Verstappen and their new Red Bull engine. And I'm going to explain why. So first I want to talk about their drivers. So obviously, brand new driver lineup for Red Bull in 2026. Max Verstappen, of course, has been their main driver, their star, for the last decade or so. And of course, joining him at Red Bull, another in a long list of young drivers, this time in the form of Isaac Hadjar. Now, for Verstappen, of course, F1 fans need no introduction to him. He's 28 years of age, from the Netherlands, and he's entering his 12th season in Formula One. He has 233 starts to his name, already has 3,444.5 points, and he's already won 4 world championships. And of course, joining him on the other side of the garage this year is a young driver in the form of Isaac Hadjar, 21 years of age, from France, starting his second year in Formula One, 23 starts last year, 51 points, and he finished 12th in the Drivers' Championship. Now, when you look at some of these more advanced stats, it shows just how important Verstappen is to Red Bull and Red Bull's success. General stats, wins, poles, podiums. He's already in, the top 3 in many of these categories. 71 wins, third all time, 48 poles, 127 podiums. Now, of course, I'm joining him on the other side of the garage. Now, in Hadjar's case, he does have 1 podium. He did pick up his first podium in F1 at the 2026 Dutch Grand Prix. A fairly impressive performance. Did get a little bit of help there to get that podium, but still fairly impressive. There's no doubt about it, Verstappen will be the number 1 driver at Red Bull this year. Now, when you look at career points above expected, looking at my expected points model, Verstappen, even compared to many of the other drivers who have talked about, Hamilton, Leclerc, I talked about a couple of days ago, but for Verstappen, he's basically almost in a category of himself, only really Alonso in terms of overall careers anywhere close to him, with points above expected of 116%. Now, for Hadjar, 85% is honestly not too terrible from his rookie season, but still there's definitely a big gap there. Now, in terms of age and experience adjusted quality rating, Verstappen shows exactly why he's so valuable to Red Bull. He's actually first in both of those categories for all drivers since 1995, so basically the last 30 years, even ahead of Hamilton, ahead of Schumacher. Quality rating of negative 0.585 and race rating of positive 2.145, which is leagues above basically anyone else. Now, for Hadjar, the numbers for him are actually pretty good too. When you adjust for his age and experience in F1, quality rating of negative 0.328 ranks 13th. So Hadjar projects to be a very, very good qualifier. And for race rating positive 0.238, that's quite a bit above average, also ranks 27th. And so this is going to be a pretty important year for Hadjar as he gets to grips with his first year in Red Bull. Now, that's kind of discussing the drivers and looking at, just how good Verstappen is so far through his F1 career, but also, Hadjar is going to be, I think, an important player and could play a very important role in the Constructors' Championship fight, depending on where Red Bull end up in that fight, of course. But I want to talk now about the other side and talking about where Red Bull's been the last year or so and where they are looking to head towards. And first, I want to do that by looking at their 2025 season. So last year, it was a very strange year. On one side of the garage, in Max Verstappen, you were competing for the championship and only lost that title by 2 points. But on the other side, you had massive struggles with Tsunoda barely picking up points on a consistent basis and only ending up with about 30 so points during his time at Red Bull. So all in all, it does create a bit of an odd picture when you look at their team stats. So the team picked up only 451 points. Over 90% of those were picked up by Verstappen. So as a result, they were third in the Constructors' Championship, whereas I think they really should have been second. Their average pole gap was the second best last year of about 0.276 seconds, with an average minimum finishing position of 3.17, which is also second, but still miles off of McLaren. I want to look at how teams have performed in the first year of a new set of regulations. So going back, starting at 2005, Red Bull finished 7th that year, 34 points. This was actually Red Bull's, I think, first year as a new team. And so again, to be expected that they would struggle. They were still, building things up, and they inherited a lot of the issues from the old Jaguar team. 2009, of course, is where Red Bull had their big breakthrough as an F1 constructor. Finished second in the constructors that year, 153.5 points, and very nearly could have won the drivers' championship if I think their drivers had maybe been a little bit cleaner and more consistent throughout the whole season. 2014, of course, was a bit of a disappointment after 2013, ending that season on such a high, but they still finished second in the constructors with 405 points. Things would of course get worse for them in 2015 before eventually starting to get a little bit better, but unfortunately with the way that those new regulations were, where engines were so important, Red Bull were still a customer team, and I think that those struggles with Renault as a customer team have played a large part of the reason why they've opted to basically be a works team since 2019, first with Honda and now basically making their own power unit, just because they know how hard it is to succeed in F1 long term as a customer team. Now, 2022, of course, things went very, very well for them. The expectation going into that new set of regulations was that Red Bull would struggle, having spent so much time and money on development in the title fight of 2021. And they were a little bit on the back foot compared to Ferrari to start the season, but they developed through the season very, very well. Ferrari were hurt massively by technical directive, and so it kind of allowed Red Bull to dominate the season, win the constructors with 759 points. So in the last 15 years, this is a team that's done very, very well for themselves in the first year of new regulations. And so even though the big question mark with this team was, of course, their brand new engine, I wouldn't put it past this team to do very well. I don't know if they'll win the championship this year, but I could definitely still see them being a front runner and a genuine threat for podiums and perhaps the odd win. Now, of course, as of the time of recording of this video, we've already had the first preseason test in Barcelona. That test went pretty well for Red Bull. The engine seems reliable. Hard to say how much performance is in the car, but at this stage of proceedings, it does at least look to be a better engine than the Honda and a better engine than the Audi engine, who are the other two newish engine manufacturers coming into F1 in 2026. So I think, all things considered, I think the championship will be really, really hard. I think that's a bit of a tall ask in year one of the regulations, but I do think that this is a team that could build themselves up to compete for a title in maybe 1 or 2 years' time, based on what we've seen with the engine so far. And the reason why that's so important is, of course, because of Max Verstappen. I think most people would consider Max Verstappen to be the best driver in F1 right now. I certainly do. And because of the unique nature of his contract, where he actually has a break clause at the end of this season, where if he's outside of the top two in the Drivers' Championship at the summer break, he could choose to basically walk away from that contract and sign a contract elsewhere, maybe a Mercedes, maybe an Aston Martin, depending on who's looking strong and who's looking like they could be a title contender in the next 3 or 4 years. So it's absolutely crucial that Red Bull at least start on the right foot, and they look like they're even if they're not the best team, they look like they're heading in the right direction in order to retain Max Verstappen. History tells us, if you go back to the mid-90s, look at Benetton and their time with Schumacher, how when Schumacher left that team in 96 to go to Ferrari, the team basically fell apart. And even though they brought in 2 pretty good drivers in Alesi and Berger, it was just never the same after then, and it took them about a decade and the arrival of Fernando Alonso to kind of get things back in shape. So that's why I think these regulations in this season is so important for Red Bull to help them convince Max Verstappen to stay at the team, but also to build towards further success after a couple of relatively tough years in 24 and 2025, at least by their standards. Now, finishing this video up with some predictions for how their drivers will fare against each other, and using my race rating and race quality rating models to make these predictions. So in terms of qualifying, I think this is perhaps a little bit ambitious on Hadjar's part, but as we've seen from the last 6-7 years at this point now, generally with every teammate that Verstappen's had, the gap between Verstappen and that teammate's been somewhere between about 3.5 tenths to basically half a second, or in the case of Liam Lawson, bless him, it was about 8 tenths. And so median quality gap of about 0.2 of a second, I think would be quite optimistic on Hadjar, and that would basically be predicting almost a best case scenario in terms of Hadjar's development from last year to this year, and it's also kind of assuming that he's actually, potentially a front-running driver in future years. In terms of race performance, I do think this is more realistic, and so hypothetically, if you were to give the team 500 points and break down those 500 points between the two drivers based on the performance differential between them, it would predict that Verstappen would get 69.4% and Hadjar would get the remaining 30.6%. And when you look at that in terms of just raw points difference, it's about 194 points difference. Verstappen, of course, ahead of Hadjar. And that's kind of roughly what you would expect. That's pretty in line with what we saw with Tsunoda, in line with what we saw with Perez. But of course, reality could be quite different. If this is a team that barely scores 100 points, let's say, Verstappen could end up with 80 of those points and Hadjar might end up with only 20. And so the percentages and the differences would look quite different. So that's kind of my preview for Red Bull's 2026 F1 season and why this season is so important to Red Bull in terms of their long-term success, keeping Max Verstappen happy, and also on the engine side with making sure that they start on the right foot. And by all accounts, things look pretty good right now with their new engine from what we've seen so far at Barcelona testing. So it'll be really interesting to see how things go in Bahrain. Of course, we have testing coming up this week. The first test and then the next test the week after, before the first race of the season in Australia, and a couple weeks further after that. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps things out. I'll be back again with more content. So thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.